Hello, it is May the 5th, May the 5th, Cinco de Mayo. This is the day that folks like to celebrate all things Hispanic, which brings me to a tweet that is now 10 years old. Let me share this with you, folks. There we go. Donald Trump. Happy Cinco de Mayo. The best taco bowls are made in Trump Tower Grill. I love Hispanics. I can't believe that is 10 years old. What is the phrase about Pierre Trudeau from one of the famous biographies? I think it was by John English. He haunts us still. So does Donald Trump. Love him or hate him, he haunts us still. He is still with us. Look, big news coming out of Ottawa about the trade talks between Canada and the U.S. and how they blew up. Big news that I broke back in October. Look, I want to give full credit to Politico and Mickey Jurek, who sourced this on her own, has her own sources, did not talk to me, did not follow up on this. But I do want to point out, and I'll walk you through it, how the trade talks with the United States fell apart is the basis of this Politico story that everyone's talking about in the nation's capital. But I do want to point out that I did break this back in October. It's just, we'll get into that. Like, why the gallery wasn't following up on it back then? I don't know. If you're hearing sirens, it's just proof that I live in downtown Toronto. Let me show you a couple of things here. Let's start with my column yesterday for the Toronto Sun. Mark Carney pushes European agenda. Yep. Mark Carney pushes European agenda. Let me get a better layout here. Come on. This is how it should be. This is what I want. So Carney pushes European agenda, again with veiled jabs at U.S. So I wrote, Mark Carney isn't looking for a new trade deal with the United States, and it doesn't appear that he wants one. Instead of being in Washington or courting the Americans to get tariffs removed on Canada's steel, aluminum, autos, and lumber, the Prime Minister is once again in Europe, whining and dining leaders there. He's also trotting out old lines about rupture, international order, and how European Canada is. Talked about that a little bit yesterday in this update, but let me, there you go, screen on screen of me on video. You don't need that. But we talked a bit about that yesterday, the whole fact that Carney is leaning into Europe again, that he is saying we're the most European of European countries. He's talking about rupture. And then along comes this piece by Politico. And again, I want to give full credit to Mickey Jurek, who is the reporter on this, talented journalist. I'm not a talented person at moving this around, but hey, doing it on my own, not doing this with a producer. This is just me in my condo going through this. So there you go. Inside the collapse of the Canada-US trade deal. Very interesting piece, very well sourced, very well written. And so, again, full shout out to Mickey Jurek. But she's describing how when Prime Minister Carney left the White House in early October, there was a deal within reach. And we all know what happened. By the end of October, Donald Trump had called off all trade talks with Canada and blamed Doug Ford's ad that quoted accurately Ronald Reagan. Now, I wondered at the time, did that have anything to do with it? Wasn't sure in the early days, but it seemed kind of weird because 2 days earlier, he had complimented the ad and said that he would have run it if he were in charge. And that is something that Mickey describes in this piece for Politico. But let me scroll down. The Reagan ad, she goes through all of that, but here's the part. She gets into this part. More detail than I did, but it's the same story. That October 15th, the day after Ford announced the anti-tariff ad, Canada's industry minister wrote to Stellantis, Canada's industry minister would be Melanie Joly, wrote to Stellantis chief executive officer Antonio Filosa threatening to sue the company over its decision to move Jeep production from Brampton to Belvedere, Illinois. Let me just clear something up here. The Jeep Compass was never being made at Brampton. Did they want it to go to Brampton? If you're part of Unifor, yes. But they weren't making the Jeep Compass there. The hope was that they would shift production there. And instead, due to tariffs and a whole bunch of other reasons, they moved production to Belvedere, Illinois. Brampton never had that production commitment. All right. So after the companies being Stellantis and GM announced plans to cut jobs or scale back vehicle production in Ontario, Lee also threatened to claw back millions the government of Canada had doled out to Stellantis and GM. What's worse, though, and this is what I reported. Let me stop this screen. What I reported on October 28th, 2025, was that because of what Joli and Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne, Frankie Bubbles, had done, that the executives from GM and Stellantis went to the White House and said, Canada screwing us over. Why we would do that? I don't know. Because, as Mickey points out in her piece for Politico, our biggest allies, and I'm leaning on her because, well, the gallery doesn't believe me. You do, but the gallery doesn't believe me. Our biggest allies in trying to fight back against the Trump tariffs are going to be American businesses that have interest in Canada, like GM, like Stellantis. And what did we do to them? We increased the tariffs on their vehicles. Now, we offered rebates, but then shrunk that down. We made it more expensive for them to import cars to Canada, which is a weird flex. I'm not sure why we did that. We went after their remittances. That's what they would get back when they did import. So, they put on a higher tariff, then said, we'll give you a remittance, then said, oh, we're going to give you a lower remittance, meaning a refund on those tariffs. All of this happening because we wanted to show that we were tough. Because what happened? Stellantis decided they were going to produce the Jeep Compass in Belvedere, Illinois. Still looking for something to produce at the Brampton plant, but decided that would go to Belvedere rather than Brampton. Again, the Jeep Compass was never produced at Brampton. Secondly, GM decided that they were going to stop production of the Bright Drop electric vehicles in Ingersoll, Ontario. Why? Because no one was buying them. They couldn't even get Canada Post to buy these for the fleet. So the Bright Drop vehicles, you may have seen them around. They're used a lot by Purolator, by FedEx. These are electric vehicles. Great things to have. Electric delivery vehicles for parcels. Great things to have in a setting like I'm in now. Downtown urban setting. You want lower emissions. You want a cheap, charge to be able to move around. And these are quick stop and start vehicles. That's the perfect use for them. But there wasn't enough demand. Private sector had bought them. Canada Post had not, even though Canada Post needed to upgrade their facilities. So the federal government could have helped on that front. They didn't. Then they threatened to sue both companies, pull their remittances. These are all things that on October 28th, 2025, I was reporting in the Toronto Sun. Why didn't people notice that? Some people did, absolutely. But let me bring up that column here, because there was something in the headline that made a lot of people sit up and take notice. And, well, you can see what it is. Do you remember this? It was the one that broke the story, yelling F-bombs, threats, and the breakdown of Canada-U.S. relations. Yes. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra at a Canada-U.S. cross-border initiative ended up getting into a bit of a screaming match with David Patterson, Ontario's representative in Washington. Why? Over the Doug Ford ad that accurately quoted Ronald Reagan. So I talk all about that. I detailed what happened, but further down in that column, and I just want to point this out, not to take anything away from what Mickey's done. I'm going to explain why I believe this needs to be pointed out. It's not just one ad. It's frustration that has built up over months, Hassett said. I'm quoting Kevin Hassett. A lack of flexibility and also leftover behaviors from the Trudeau folks that can be very frustrating for those people who are negotiating. I figured out that he was talking about Melanie Joly. I called around. I found out what happened. In between Trump saying, I believe it was on a Tuesday, that, hey, if I was Canada, I would take that ad out. And Thursday, when he broke off all trade talks, GM and Stellantis went to the White House and said, this is what Melanie Joly and Francois-Philippe Champagne and the Carney government are doing to us. And that is why Trump called off the trade talks. I said it back then. I'll say it again today. That is why. Let me play you a clip of Hassett on this very issue.
Mr. Hassett, just very quickly, what it has been so challenging about dealing with Canada in trade negotiations?
I guess the lack of flexibility and, also I would guess that leftover behaviors from like the Trudeau folks that can be very frustrating for people who are negotiating.
Very frustrating for people who are negotiating. That was the actual, I can't remember the actual timeline. I think that might have been the Friday after the trade talks were called off. And this was a couple days later when I put out the clip. But, this is why it's important that if you want to be up to date, that you subscribe at brianlilly.com. Absolutely read the Toronto Sun every day, but subscribe at brianlilly.com because you're going to get the links to my columns sent to you, but you're going to get bonus material like that clip. I shared an extended version of that clip where Hassett was saying back in October, it wasn't the ad. It's not just one ad. There's a frustration. And he talked at length about the frustrations that he was having with the Carney team. But at the end, that was the clip where the person said, well, what's so frustrating about Canada? And he described the leftovers from the Trudeau team. Melanie Joly decided she had to show that she was being tough with two companies that are going to be our best allies in attempting to get out of this. It is mind-boggling that we can be that stupid, and yet we are. Now, the unfortunate part is that so many in the elbows up crowd don't care. They just want Mark Carney to fight with Donald Trump. I get it in emails and online comments every day. You can't negotiate with that guy. Doesn't matter. He wants to annex us still, and he's going to invade any day. Yeah, I'm waiting for the Globe and Mail to publish their next letter to the editor from some octogenarian granny in Victoria who says her gardening tools are sharpened and at the ready to fight off the invasion. People are unhinged. Carney plays into that. And that's what his Davos speech was about just the other day. Do I have that one here? Let me see.
It's my strong personal view that as the international order will be rebuilt, but it will be rebuilt out of Europe. And so I'm very appreciative of the symbolism of this invitation. Thank you.
Yeah. That was the end of Carney's speech, his Davos Redux mini speech in Armenia just yesterday. If you subscribe to the newsletter or follow the Toronto Sun's YouTube channel, I did a longer piece where I played the clips of his rupture comments and the hegemons and all of that. Broke it down. It's also in the latest column that I showed you earlier. So go and read those, share those. They're not trying for a deal because they don't want one. And it's due to our own stupidity that the talks broke off. One of the things that Mickey Jurek has in her Politico piece that I don't is how effusive the Americans were at trying to get a deal with us last October before all of this happened. They were, and please go and read that Politico piece. They were extremely excited at the thought of getting a deal with us, and we screwed it up. Now, why am I talking about this and, Yeah, I'm blowing my own horn. Absolutely. But why? There's only 2 reporters that have put this out that I can see. I have not seen anybody else. There's myself back at the end of October. There's Mickey now here at the beginning of May. Why hasn't every media outlet done this story? Why isn't this regularly part of the narrative instead of just saying, well, Doug Ford caused all this to happen? Because they would not believe anything Trump said. Most of the gallery will not believe a thing Donald Trump says. But they believe him when he says it's Doug Ford's ad that stopped this. Now, look, I've talked to Ambassador Hoekstra. He's, definitely well profiled in Mickey's piece, where Hoekstra is saying, no, it was the ad, and no country in the world has ever run an attack ad against the sitting U.S. president, and this is awful. He has some valid points there. I think that Ford's ad was fair and relevant, but I can understand how it would ruffle American feathers. But it wasn't the ad that broke off the talks. And every single newsroom should be telling you this. But they're believing Donald Trump on this because it allows them to blame Doug Ford instead of Mark Carney. And as former Harper-era cabinet minister James Moore said recently on CBC, there's 3 great love stories in the history of the English language. You've got Romeo and Juliet, Will and Kate, and Mark Carney and the national media and Mark Carney. You might just extend it to the Liberal government because for many years they were like this with Trudeau. They don't want to criticize Carney. They're afraid to criticize Carney. And yet it was our own actions that did this. So please read the pieces, share them, and we'll move on. Let's see. Where is the next piece that I want to show you? Oh, yeah, just before I leave Mark Carney, I will share this one with you. Yesterday afternoon, posted this. Just a fun thought experiment. Is Mark Carney's majority in trouble already? How do I get to that? Well, you can read the piece. It's at brianlilly.com. Again, subscribe. That part's free. You can pay up if you want for some other stuff, but that part's free. Basically, you've got a couple of different things happening. You've got Jonathan Wilkinson, who has announced that he is leaving to go become Canada's ambassador to the European Union. He won't leave for a little while. He's got to wrap up his affairs, wrap up his office. That does take a while. A lot of people wouldn't expect that. You can just resign immediately. But if you're trying to do it, it's like leaving any job. If you're trying to do it responsibly, you give a bit of time, you wrap up files, and you move on. So there's going to be a by-election in North Vancouver, Capilano. This is an area that has, Wilkinson's had it since 2015, I guess. Prior to that, it was conservative. It was liberal. It was conservative. It was reform. It was progressive conservative. It's been a bit of a swing riding, and more often than not, leaning to the conservative side. So they could actually lose that one. Beaches East York in Toronto, Nathaniel Erskine Smith wants to become the Ontario Liberal leader. He's running in a riding. It gets very complicated. Go read. I describe all of it there. But he's looking to leave. That could be a second one, and that riding's also up for grabs. There's going to be 3 by-elections soon. The Liberals could win 2 of them, or they could win none of them. They're not going to win all 3 this time, and I explain why in that piece. My colleague Warren Kinsella, writing about something that, I thought they can't be serious about this. He writes, Cocky Carney should ground any airport privatization plans. Governments that privatized airports have found mixed results, and the public is unenthusiastic too. We already have, especially at Pearson, we've got some of the highest landing fees and user fees of anywhere. So it's not a good setup under the not-for-profit model that it currently operates under. I should call up Duncan D., the former Air Canada chief operating officer, and get him to explain this. Because the Americans operate their airports very differently, much more socialist than we do. I'm generally in favor of the private sector, but there's some things that, it's not going to really work out. It will cost a lot more if we do privatize. I can't. Airports are just something that it is a public good. It's like a roadway. How do you operate it for a profit and not drive up costs? That's difficult to see. Some things governments can do, some they can't. If someone can show me a good argument, I'll listen. But the Americans treat their airports as a public good, and they don't have the ridiculous fees that we do. And therefore, that's part of why their air travel is a lot cheaper. Ours is always going to be more expensive. We don't have the density. We've got bigger distances, but part of it are the policies that we enact as well. A couple of other quick things. I've been writing about some of the problems with our shelter system here in Toronto. Tristan Hopper over at National Post. BC turned a $56 million hotel into a low barrier shelter. It's now an unlivable biohazard. Yeah, I've heard of that one. And then John Iveson, still well connected despite living in Costa Rica now. Still well connected, knows what's happening in Ottawa. And those of you that have been paying attention to my conversations with Michelle Rempel-Garner and such will like this. John Iveson, there's blood in the water around the Liberals' immigration minister. Lena Diab, not doing a good job at all. Okay, last thing before I go. I am getting fed up with people calling for politicians to be jailed just because you don't like them or you disagree with them. I don't like it. I don't like it when Donald Trump does it to Hillary, but as I can explain, it goes back well but before that, and the left has been especially bad at doing this. Well, yesterday at Queen's Park, the leader of the official opposition, no, that's not the Liberal leader. Believe it or not, it's the leader of the NDP. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows her name either. It's Merritt Stiles. She actually called for Doug Ford to be jailed and said there's a good chance he'll be in jail before the end of his next term.
But listen, don't worry about it, Doug, because when I'm premier, I'm going to call a public inquiry into all of this, and we're going to get our hands on all of that. And you know what? Maybe you won't get another mandate because you'll be in prison, Doug. Yeah.
What?
I think he's like,
What?
I think that when we call a public inquiry, which is what it took to get to the bottom of some of the questions around other governments, I think it's a lot of terrible stuff is going to come out. Why is the premier hiding all of this information from the people of Ontario? Why doesn't he want anybody to know what's on his phone? Because there's
Unbelievable. Now how do I get back to this? How do I get back to myself? Okay, so Merritt Stiles, just a little unhinged. Do you have to agree with Doug Ford's changes to the Freedom of Information Act? Absolutely not. But the fact is the changes that are being made, bring it in line with the federal level, bring it in line with most provinces. Do I want more information? Always. What do I know after 25 years of dealing with this at the federal, municipal, and provincial level? Is that they're going to try and screw you and keep the information secret, but she wants to make it sound all criminal. It's not criminal. And she's always going back to the Greenbelt, and there's this soft undertone of anti-Italian racism because a lot of the developers are Italian, and make it sound like Doug Ford was all mobbed up with these mobsters. Why can you hint at the fact that they're mobsters? Because they're mostly Italian. And so you lean into that bigotry, which I find really unseemly and untoward. I don't like it at all. These are people who have donated millions upon millions of dollars to fund the public healthcare system and build new hospitals. Yeah, their names are on them, or they're on a wing or a portion of the hospital, but they donated their money. And Merritt Stiles is using this for cheap political gain. Like I said, didn't like it when Hillary did it. Didn't like it when Joe Biden, weaponized the DOJ to go after Trump. Jailing your political opponents or calling them to be jailed, unless there's actual evidence of wrongdoing, which there is not here, even after 3 years of an RCMP investigation into the Greenbelt, that's Banana Republic stuff and not what we should be doing. All right, I'm going to wrap up now. Within the hour, we will probably find out who our next Governor General is. unless it's Louise Arbour or some other wholly inappropriate person. I'm not sure I'm going to care. But thanks for watching. And again, make sure you, brianlilly.com, hit subscribe. You'll get all the columns from The Sun. You'll get all the other material because the algorithms keep changing and the tech guys can change it at a moment's notice. Then you're not going to find stuff. So that's why I'm pumping the subscribe stuff. Talk soon.